Great. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Hi. Let folks roll in for just a minute or two, but glad to see everybody here. I think mostly familiar names, but maybe a new person or two. Yeah, it feels like I don't know, is it just me? It feels like it's been a while. Is it a longer month than usual? Feels like it's been a while. All right, so it's 7:01. We'll let people roll in for just one more minute. Hey, Charlie. Hey, Brucey.
Hey there.
Hey. Oh, Charlie, this probably works for you because it's not on Tuesday, right?
No.
Yes.
No, too. So I think we'll just go ahead and get started with the beginning part of our meeting. So my name is Rosemary Malfi. I am the Pollinator Network Coordinator at NOFA Mass, and I facilitate these meetings. And I welcome you all here tonight for our July meeting. I think I see mostly familiar names, but a couple new folks. So if you're new, feel free to raise your little emoji hand or put your information in the chat, just your name and where you're calling in from. In fact, everyone can do that. If you want to put in your name, where you're calling in from, that would be great. You do a little waterfall in the chat and just see who's here. And the way for folks who are not familiar, the reason why we generally host these meetings are to discuss a variety of topics, but I think more than anything to give people across the state who are interested in pollinators and pollinator protection a chance to interact with one another and to network and make those connections. So the way that we usually structure these meetings is we'll give some overarching updates, I will, and then we move into breakout rooms just for a short period of time, about 10 minutes, so that folks can introduce themselves in a smaller group setting, just because there tend to be a lot of folks in these meetings, so we can't do it as a larger group. And then we'll come back together and we'll move on to our topic for this evening, which is Ask a Gardener. We have some expert gardeners in the room. I'm not one of them to answer questions about gardening for wildlife and for pollinators. And yeah, I hope you came with your questions. I certainly have some of my own that I'm hoping get answered tonight. All right, so just to go over a few updates for the network, folks are maybe familiar, unless you're new to our meetings, you're probably familiar with the fact that we've been working on some state level legislation as a network. There are certain bills that we have been supporting. The legislative session's about to end. It ends July 31st, so just in a few days here. If you go to our homepage, I'm just going to drop that into the chat. If you want, you don't have to, but if you want to check that out now or later, you can see the four sort of major bills that we've been supporting. And I just wanted to give you an update on two of them. One is an act to protect pollinator habitat, which would establish a commission to study how the state can improve and expand pollinator habitat in the state. And we got word that this is going to be moved or taken up during the informal session in the fall, which essentially means they think it's unopposed. Informal sessions when they do things like rename streets and things like that. So we think it's going to move forward at that time. So that's really good news. And then the other great piece of news that we got is that the final climate bill, which was sent to Governor Baker's desk, includes Section 48, which will revive the state's pollinator-friendly solar program, which was terminated at the end of last year. So those are both really great things. And for sure, 100%, all of your calls and your letters really made a difference. And in particular with the solar campaign, that's something that the network has been working on for many months, even before it was a legislative question. So I want to thank everybody for your involvement in that. I really appreciate you mobilizing, and it made a difference. So thank you. So those are great updates. And then I also wanted to let folks know that we're putting together a seminar series for the fall. So we had fewer of them this spring, but we're recharging for the fall. And we have about a speaker per month. So starting in September, we're going to have Cass Urban-Mead, who's a pollinator conservation specialist with the Xerces Society. She'll be delivering a seminar on the importance of trees and orchards for bee populations, which I'm pretty excited about because it's something that's relatively understudied. In October, Larry Cochran, who's a master gardener in Western Mass, will be giving a talk on leaving the leaves and other gardening practices for improving pollinator health through the Berkshire Botanical Garden. That's something that the Mass Pollinator Network is partnering on. And then the Mass Pollinator Network and Lexington Living Landscapes will be hosting Desiree Naranga, who's a wildlife and conservation biologist, and that will be in early December. She was a student of Doug Talamy's. She's at UMass Amherst, although I think she's moving on to a position in Vermont. So that is a very exciting lineup, and just stay tuned for information about that. And we'll of course be posting those events on our website. All right, well, those were my major updates. I am now going to give folks a chance to introduce yourselves to one another in small groups. So just give me one moment to try and set up these breakout rooms. All right. Okay, so I'm going to send you to breakout rooms, and you can give your name, your pronouns, where you're calling in from, and then you can choose what you want to share, but maybe share what brought you to the meeting tonight, or maybe a question that you have. Don't answer it in the group, but a question that you might have. All right. Okay, I'm going to open up those rooms, and we'll chat. Oh,
Rosemary, how long do we have in the rooms? Just so we
about 10. Let's go with 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes. Okay. So short introductions. Oh, oops. Okay, I have to open them. Here we go. Everyone should be migrating back from the breakout rooms. Hopefully no one gets lost along the way. All right, everyone should be heading back now. All right. Welcome back, everyone. I know it's never really enough time, but I hope you got to make a connection, say hi to somebody, maybe meet somebody new. Those are always fun connections to make. All right, so with that, we're going to move on to the sort of main portion of our meeting, the Ask a Gardener section. And I think I'll introduce our panelists. So we've invited a few expert gardeners. I'm sure there are more in the room. But tonight we have Heidi Dollard, who is on the Mass Pollinator Network Steering Committee and is also a master gardener, and an almost master gardener, well on the way. We have John Root, who's over there in Amherst and founded Pollinate Amherst, is a landscaper and naturalist. And then we have Jean Devine, who is an environmental educator and also the principal of Devine Native Plantings and consults on that work. So thank you to the three of you for being here and for answering some questions. I know we have a lot of collective experience in the room too. So I think the way that we'll handle this is, folks can raise your hand, you can ask a question. I think if you have something to say in response to a panelist or after a panelist, you can put that into the chat, or you can try and raise your hand and sort of offer a quick comment on that response. All right, so hopefully that's clear. I'm going to kick us off with a question. Folks, feel free to start raising your hand to ask your questions too. So for our panelists, I guess my first question to you is to maybe just give us a quick, like couple sentences about your experience and maybe the top 2 plants that are most dear to you and why. And let's start with Heidi and John and Jean.
That's really tough. So as I told my group, I have been volunteering for, I think this is my 3rd year, maybe my 4th year, at the native plant nursery in Cummington called Wing and a Prayer Nursery. And I also have a native plant meadow, and most of the plants in my garden are native. Oh, my favorite plant, what could it be? Well, I'm very fond of the penstemons, Penstemon digitalis and Penstemon hirsutus. They are really easy to grow. They are a wide range of soils, pretty much full sun, but they look great all year round. They have even the seed heads, which persist in the winter, look really nice. I think are very decorative. So those are really great. And then I guess, am I cheating by naming a genus instead of a species?
That's fine.
um, Probably the mountain mints. They are because they're also really easy to grow. They, oh boy, just thinking of other plants that I really love. They just, boy, some of them just are just like alive with pollinators, and they attract a lot of unusual ones that you don't see on a lot of other plants. A lot of beetles and all kinds of flies, crazy stuff. So they're really interesting.
I like those too.
Okay, next.
All right, John. Oh, you're muted,
You're
John.
muted.
Sorry about that.
Start
Yeah,
all over again.
I'll give another nod to mountain mint, and yes, today I was watching the wasps patrolling on the mountain mint, and it's a mint, so it'll spread nicely for you, but it's not one of those aggressive mints that are hard to keep in line, right?
Yeah.
So it's just right. I mean, you want this patch to grow because there's so many different pollinators, as Heidi said. And here's another plus about mountain mint. If you take the leaves of the plant and rub them on your skin, it's a mosquito repellent. It works for about at least 15 minutes. It might repel other insects as well that are bothering you.
And
So
Roger was just saying that they are edible. People can.
Well, yes, it's kind of like the spearmint tea, mountain mint, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So it has all that going for it. And the second plant I wanted to mention is
Russ, not Roger. Russ, sorry. Go ahead.
Willow trees, because oh my gosh, they bloom early in the spring, really early, and those pollinators are hungry. And willow it just attracts so many different kinds of pollinators. Plus, it's a host tree for so many different caterpillars. So it's a win-win. And of course, it's it's not a long-lived tree, and it may not be the most beautiful tree in the world, but for those in the know, it's definitely, and of course, pussy willow is something that many people consider to be decorative and enjoy having that. So to bring inside and put in a vase. So yeah, those are my two.
Wonderful.
Good choice.
Oh, and just who I am, Rosemary mentioned I'm a landscaper, and for years I was doing PowerPoint presentations at libraries and senior centers and garden clubs and that sort of thing. But the more I get involved as a landscaper now, the more I'm really learning a lot, just learning by doing.
Awesome. Thank you, John. All right, Jean, you're up.
I'm Jean. I'm hot. I'm a totally self-taught plantscaper, native plants. I came in from the perspective of teaching youth how to do something positive for the earth by creating native plant gardens. So started with meadows, all sunny meadows, and then learned the shade plants. I'm in an urban area. I'd love to plant trees. I'd say an oak tree would be my favorite, but don't often get the chance to do it because I teach in Cambridge. We're lucky if we can plant sidewalk strips. So I also teach in Arlington and Belmont. There is a little more room there. My avatar is goldenrod, used to be my favorite plant. It is now one of my nemesis. I'm working in a property in the north side of Alewife Reservation that is 99.9% goldenrod. And I got involved when I said to the person there, this place needs re-diversification. There's too much of this. And the people I'm working with just love goldenrod. And I'm like, yeah, there's too much of it. So that's not my favorite. I also got more involved in ground cover. So I'd say my favorite this year is the Zizia, the Golden Alexander, which is looking nice.
Yeah.
For me, it's still looking nice. And it's like, there's a lot of beaten up things in my yard, but the Zizia is looking nice. I like grape blue lobelia. Comes out later in the season, and I always feature a Monarda fistulosa, I think, in my yard. So, and it's got that benefit of being a mint, so it's not in the bunny's diet or the deer diet, so it holds up well.
Let's add that Monarda fistulosa is wild bergamot. It's nice to give people a common name. Wild
Oh,
bergamot.
yes.
It looks a lot like bee balm, which most people are familiar with. Bee balm has either red or magenta flowers, but wild bergamot has pink flowers. But it's the same structure of the inflorescences kind of in a circle. They get pretty tall, sometimes up to 6 feet or so. And I've seen that wild bergamot is actually the #1 plant in terms of popularity with native bees. It attracts 15 different genera of native bees, and no other plant attracts that many genera. And native bees are the most important pollinators, with flies #2, interestingly.
Mm.
Nice. All right. Oh, thought I heard someone say something. Feel free to raise your hand to ask your own question, and the emoji hand is more effective than your actual hand because I can't see everybody on one screen. Or you can also unmute, and if that's not working for you, you can unmute and just say your name. All right, we'll wait for, oh, Charlie.
Yes, so John's mention of pussy willows made me wonder. I've heard that one's better off with a male pussy willow because they provide pollen as well as nectar. But I've had trouble finding a nursery that will say, yes, this is a male. So is it more useful to have a male than a female? And if so, any ideas where to find one?
I've heard that too, Charlie. And no, I don't. Go ahead, Heidi. Do you have an answer?
I do know. There is a nursery in northern Vermont. I believe it's called the Vermont Willow Nursery. And you can buy willow sticks in the spring. And willows are so unbelievably robust and vigorous that you get a packet of sticks and you just plant it in the ground, or better, I have better luck planting them in a deep container. And once they take root, you have a willow tree in no time. And you can specifically ask for a male. And I believe they will, if they possibly can, they will honor that request.
Yeah, I did in fact ask them this spring.
And what did they say?
They said not this year. They weren't prepared or set up to do that, but
because I know that Amy has gotten some, and they did it was last year, and they did send her some males.
I will ask again. I'll try again. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, just another note about willows, because they are just so amazingly easy to root. If you know somebody that has a willow that you want, just ask for a cutting in the spring, and it will grow. So
yeah, great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
John or Gina, do you want to add to that, or we're good?
I don't have any pussy willow experience.
Okay, great. Vivian, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Pardon me for not being visible tonight. I was just wondering whether any of our master gardeners who have done work on public spaces, or maybe institutions like schools or museums or libraries, whether they've been involved in developing signage, because this is a challenge that we're facing right now in our town. And both small discrete signage for each plant, and then something slightly larger to designate what the purpose of this particular bed of plants is before they flower, because we're getting a lot of questions, and people are accustomed to having annuals planted in the public space, very showy, and we planted perennials. They were planted late, so there were a lot of problems with that. It was not in our control. It was done by our Department of Public Works. But now we are facing the challenge of how to tell people about what's there. And I was wondering if anybody has any experience with that, or even if they haven't had to do it directly personally, whether they've seen any signage that they could recommend as a good example.
I think signage is key to advancing the cause here. And since I'm an educator, I will, when students make a garden, I'm also one of the co-founders of the Mystic Charles Pollinator Pathway Group. So we try to get the gardens onto the pollinator map and then put a pollinator pathway sign there, but some kind of sign that explains what's going on here. So people will stop and look. And because I've never had a budget that's big, I would just send something over to Staples and have it laminated and then affixed it to those politician signs. They make corrugated signs too. So it may be this garden was made by students of the blah, blah program to, you know, it's a native plant garden to support pollinators. But I'm also near Alewife where they established kiosks. I think that's a good idea if it's a big enough garden, so that you can open the glass of the kiosk and put, you know, information in about the plants and you can vary it. But for me personally, putting a sign on a plant, that's the biggest challenge, because weather sort of strips it away or wipes it off, you know.
Yeah.
And again, for me, budget is always an issue. I have a friend who got the tin kind and said she found a pen that doesn't wipe off when she uses it. In the past, my students would take the label off the plant and affix it to a popsicle stick with tape. And it would show a picture of the plant. So when the plant's not in bloom, you can see what it is. Mm-hmm. That lasts for about a season though. Mm-hmm. So that's my experience.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm sorry. How do you raise your hand?
If you go to reactions.
Reactions.
Raise hand.
I think Heidi wanted to respond to that question.
Yeah,
yes.
I just wanted to say very quickly, I have also experienced a lot of difficulty labeling things permanently. It's really tough. But there's a pollinator meadow at the Silvio Oconti Wildlife Refuge in Hadley, and they have some very expensive signs, and they have, you know, sort of a big panel which explains, you know, that it's a pollinator meadow and what pollination is. You know, it's a really big format sign, which I know is probably way out of the price range of most projects. But if you can affix a QR code, you can then have a lot more information. If people are willing to take a picture of that QR code, then they could go to a website where there's a lot more information, and that could be a less expensive option. I've also been, the good permanent signs are super, super expensive.
And the corrugated ones last pretty well. I mean, they'll last
they do.
A few years or something like that, right?
Yeah, they're not bad. But for individual plants, I haven't found a workable solution.
Yeah, the QR code sounds like a great idea, because we don't have a big budget.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you, Vivian. And there's also a suggestion in the chat, maybe a local college or high school could be involved in helping to design that sign, which is a great idea. Okay, Jocelyn, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to Melinda.
Muted. Now I'm muted. Okay. So as far as signs, my name is Jocelyn. I have a native plant nursery called Checker Spot Farm in Coleraine, Massachusetts. And we've been doing farmers markets, and I've gotten a lot of compliments on my signs. And I just wanted to say, because basically what I've done, you know, is taking the plant, showing what it looks in bloom, and then put a picture of the host butterfly that it supports, not the butterfly, the host, like the caterpillars. And if anybody, I mean, I don't have any, if anybody wants to borrow any of my words or any of them, my template, you're welcome to. If it's useful, why are we inventing the wheel? So it's on our website under like plants available. But basically we grow all the basic plants. So, if you like the verbiage and you like the display, I can send you the template, as a JPEG or something else, and you can use it.
Oh, fantastic. That would really speed things up. It's great.
And the QR code is a really good idea, because I've noticed people spend a lot when they're at the farmers markets. People spend a lot of time reading my signs, and because they don't know much, they're interested, but they don't know much. And so I find it's been like, it's almost more important than the plant. But I see a lot of people taking pictures of my signs, and I didn't do a QR code, but even though didn't think of it, I think that a QR code would be a budget-friendly way for people to learn.
Jocelyn, what's your website?
All right, I'll put it in the chat. Okay.
Yes, if you could put your website in the chat, and then if there's a specific place where folks can find an example of those signs, that would be great too.
Tab under plants available. It's just a slideshow of all the different 8x12 pieces of paper that I made.
Awesome.
But I can send you the JPEGs if you want any.
Great. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. That's very helpful and generous. Thank you.
Terrific. Yeah, it's terrific. Thank you.
Melinda, you had your hand up?
Yeah. Hello, this is for anybody. Hi. I planted a bump out of about 200 square feet in front of my property as part of Watertown Community Gardens and Friends of Bees effort to get Watertown residents more interested in planting their strips right by the road. And so I planted a bag of 10-year-old dwarf peas, and they all came up, and they grew to 2 feet tall. Now they have passed on, but the rest of the garden is doing really well. I want to turn them under, but I can't mow them because there's no space. I don't have a mower. And because it's such cruddy soil, they've only got about 2 inches of cruddy soil and 3 inches of compost to work with. I don't know and I don't want to pull them out because they're probably dropping nitrogen into the soil right now. So do I cut them off at the surface level of the soil and do my best to turn them into the little bit of soil that's there? What would you guys recommend?
Well,
Go ahead, Heidi.
so I think cutting them off is a great idea because then the roots are already in the soil and they'll rot. And then I would chop up the rest of the plants and just put them back on top.
Okay. Thank you. I wasn't sure if the above soil plant were just as important to get underground as, obviously not, but thank you. I will chop them and turn them into mulch.
Yeah, that stuff will slowly work its way down, and in the meantime, as it rots, the nutrients will just be washed into the soil underneath.
Fantastic. I'm so glad I came on this call. Could I just make one quick announcement, Rosemary?
Yes, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just to let the group know that the Garden of Life tour in Watertown for gardens and this year for planting strips will be September 11th from 1 to 5. And if anybody in Watertown has a garden that they'd like to show or a planting strip that they would like to feature, I hope you just go to the Friends of Bees website and there's a sign-up form there. We'd be delighted to have you either as a visitor or a host.
Excellent. That sounds very
like
fun.
fun.
Melinda, will you put the Friends of Bees link into the chat?
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Feel free to raise your hands. Until you do, I have a question. Oh, Isabel, go ahead.
So I'm in Concord, and I'm putting in a pollinator garden plot meadow. I don't know what's a garden, what's a meadow, and I have a large area that has very healthy crabgrass, and so I want to prepare it for next year, and I'm wondering if I should till it. I want to aerate the soil before I put cardboard and compost on top. And I'm wondering if I need to pull all of that grass first, and that would obviously aerate the soil, but it's really heavy work. Does it make sense to till it and then pull the grass out, or should I just, I mean, I don't want to just smush the soil down with the cardboard and the compost.
You may not, I'm not sure why you're concerned about the compact. Is your soil compacted right now?
Yeah, it's compacted with this crabgrass.
Well,
heavily.
So,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, I pull up a 2-foot mat of crabgrass when I loosen it.
First, there's a way to test for how compacted soil is, and the quick and easy way is to plunge a straightened wire coat hanger into the ground about a foot, and if you can wiggle it around, okay, then it's not compacted. But if you can barely move, if it bends right away, then it's compacted. And something else I will say about sheet mulching, it's a great way to invite the earthworms, which then will do what earthworms do. I mean, they'll do great tunneling. Earthworms love sheet mulching. And the reason for that is that they like to get it on in the dark, and so and moist places, because of course they don't want to do that in the sunshine. They'll be easy pickings for the birds. So so you're giving them a safe place to have sex, and at the same time, just feeding them all kinds of great organic matter. So they'll it's amazing when you when you peel off the layers of a sheet mulch and see all the earthworms.
Oh yeah,
having a party.
Yeah, but I plan to not. What I hope to do is what Carla did in Chelmsford, is take an auger in the spring and be able to just dig a hole and plant my plugs.
Yeah, I concur with John that you may not actually aerate the soil by turning it over. That what the latest garden advice is that it's actually not necessarily a good thing to work the soil, because if you have a lot of clay, it can actually destroy the soil structure.
That's right.
So what people are saying now is try to work the soil as little as possible. So if this has a giant root mat, that's like great organic matter that's already in the soil. And if you cover it with cardboard, you're going to kill all that crabgrass, and it's just going to rot and be in the soil. And that's great. That's like instant organic matter you've just added to your soil. And yes, the earthworms will have a ball, and they will make tunnels and aerate it. And yeah, so I would not turn over the soil, and I would just put a layer of as much compost as you can manage.
Yeah. I'll add about I don't know if you're thinking about rototilling, but a problem with rototilling, well, the person who asked the question, was thinking about turning over the soil. Another problem with rototilling, other than what Heidi mentioned, is that it can actually make the soil more compacted. It can also cause tiller pan, which means the tines can only reach so low, and so the exact layer where the tines go, that's glazing the soil and making it actually more difficult for the roots to get through that tiller pan layer.
Right.
There are a lot of things, and of course, it's a bad day in the garden for all those microbes when you till. Having said that, if you're establishing a wildflower meadow, there's a guy named Owen Wormser right? That's really his last name, Wormser. And he wrote a book From Lawns into Meadows. And he actually,
yeah.
the most common prep for creating a meadow is to cultivate, and to cultivate several times. And the reason he does is because, well, it works, not just once, but the second and third tilling is to make sure that you get the weed seeds that are going to come up as soon as you till the first time, because they're exposed. Okay, so after that third time, you pretty much get them, and then those microbes will move back in to the soil, and because you're not going to till ever again, it's not that bad in terms of environmental consequences, according to Owen. So it's that's the one exception I would say about turning over the soil is good for a wildflower meadow prep.
Okay. What I had learned when I was started no-till in my own garden was to pitchfork the grass so that it had some aeration, and then put the cardboard down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. Thank you so much.
But you don't need to do that first step. If you just put the cardboard down, you're going to kill the grass.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Thank you. Thank you
don't-
for asking that. Oh,
Don't forget
go
the
ahead,
crabgrass is an annual anyway, so it's not going to.
Oh no, I have the best crabgrass in the town.
Ken.
Still an annual.
Yeah.
Thank you, Isabel. Linda, I see your hand up.
So Cindy Smith, who's also on here, we together with Groton Garden Club put in a native plant garden at our town hall, and we bought a lot of plugs and put those in. Of course, they're teeny tiny. So I had read that it was recommended by several people to put down partridge pea. So I winter sowed the partridge pea and put out all the little seedlings in the spring, and only like 2 plants made it. So I don't know what happened to them, and I don't know, maybe that's not the best method for doing it. Maybe I should have just scattered the seed at some point. So I was looking to see, because I'd like to do it again, and I'd like to do it in my own yard too. How do people plant partridge pea?
Well,
Heidi and then Jean.
establishing a meadow is not easy. I mean,
It's not a meadow.
Well,
This is not a meadow that we're putting in. It's a regular garden.
and I'm not sure why you planted the partridge pea.
Because the plugs are so tiny and they're only going to grow a little bit. So we use
It
the
was
partridge
because you just
pea
wanted
as the-
something to be blooming.
No, we use the partridge pea. It was recommended to plant that as like a green mulch rather than just having, the mulch there. So,
Well,
So as a ground cover, sounds like.
yeah.
Well, the partridge pea really took off and was thick and dense. It might have just overshadowed and competed with the plugs.
The people that have used it said that doesn't happen. It
You
shades them a little bit and protects them when they're little.
Yeah, I know that's what they say, but I think, I've also had experience with plugs, and you do have to really keep them watered too.
You mentioned that you put the plugs. You mentioned that you put the plugs in the spring. I've heard that there was a project in Northampton, Pollinate Northampton. They put plugs in November, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
And they looked really puny, right? But boy, in the spring they were ready and they took off. And so you might want to consider planting those plugs in the fall.
Well, the plugs are in, so it's done. They've already been planted, and we couldn't put them in the fall because
Well, are you sure they're all dead?
the partridge pea.
No, the plugs.
No, the plugs are fine.
Well, then what's the problem?
The partridge.
The partridge pea. So the partridge pea did they were seedlings, right, from winter sow that got transferred.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were teeny tiny,
Yeah,
like
and they didn't
Wait a
take
minute,
off.
I don't understand the problem now. What is the question?
the partridge pea didn't make it except for 2 plants.
Oh.
I'm gonna
oh,
let
I'm
Jean-
wondering how people plant
So we
partridge pea.
have both kind of things.
Wait, okay.
My plot had been previously sown and then they threw hay on top. That's why I got such great hay, crabgrass. So some of those did survive the winter. And I got some, of the ones that were sown in the fall. But then we also planted, and not very deep, I think might be the issue. But we had good germination back in June. And I think, it didn't take long for the partridge peas to come up. I was encouraged by Charlie to go ahead and do it. And the ones that we put in, that the team who previously had this ground put it in the fall, those are blooming beautifully. And just let them be. I don't know if you tried to winter sow them in a milk jug or if you just put them in the field or in the garden.
No, I have a plastic container that I winter sow them in. Cindy, can you help me out at all? Because I don't think, is there anybody here that has
I was gonna
I
let
think
Jean, let's let Jean.
partridge
I'm
pea?
just gonna say, I'm gonna second Charlie's comment because I know what his success has been, and another member of our group, Kelly, has done. Of all the plants that you have to stratify and scarify, blah, 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 partridge pea can be direct sown. So it's probably better to have tried to just scatter that when you planted your plugs. But don't despair. The other idea is to get a few plants and plant some plants in among your plugs so that you're encouraged, especially if the plugs are still sort of small. So you're getting a little bit more activity going on there to support it. So we're in a drought now, so I'm maybe not then, but I've seen where people, did a whole big sidewalk area with plugs, but they punctuated it with a few native plants, and that helped. And you could even choose some that are, nitrogen fixers if you want, but Charlie has a great comment here. So Charlie, maybe you want to add, you've done it both seasons, right?
Yes, I've just thrown the seed on the ground, both in the fall and the spring. I've had good luck. I try to add just a thin layer of either soil or mulch or something to help conserve moisture. And they're slow to germinate, but they come up and I've had great success. And I use it just as you're suggesting, Linda, to I've read that it's good for sort of filling in space while you're waiting for perennials to become established.
Yeah, they do.
And the bees love it.
They do recommend it, and it is a really pretty plant. But remember, it's an annual, so you weren't going to get it next year anyway. So if you want to try again this year, that would be a good idea. I mean, this fall, or plant more in the spring. But it's not a permanent part of your meadow. It's just temporary.
And again, it's not a meadow, it's a garden.
Garden, I'm sorry, it's not permanent.
So Charlie, what I'd like to do is, I'm gonna leave everything standing for the winter, and then in the spring, when it is like the right time, I'm gonna cut everything down and try and just, like in my own yard, what I do is I take a hedge trimmer and I just kind of like take a couple inches at a time and like kind of mow everything down. So if I do that, should I put the partridge pea down before I do that or after I do that? Any ideas?
Yeah, I'll say I'm out of my depth here. I've always just laid it down on bare soil as opposed to anything that had old vegetation on it.
Okay.
And I don't know how it would do in that instance. Maybe someone else does.
Yeah, we put straw on top of ours. Very surface, not deep.
Well, the seed should contact the soil in order to germinate. So I would say put the partridge pea down and then cut down the old vegetation and let it go on top of the partridge peas. And then that would be the same as laying down hay or straw or whatever, which apparently is the recommended procedure.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go to Cynthia, because I don't think you've had your hand up before, right?
No, I was just commenting on the partridge pea.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a small garden that Linda, Lauren, and our garden club have put together. And there's one that's blooming, and it's 18 inches tall. There's another one that's probably a foot. And then there's a couple other ones that are just barely, like, if you didn't know what you were doing, you might pull it out as a weed. And it's only 19 feet diameter with a ginormous rock in the middle. And we've, like done groupings of 3 around this rock. And it's just very strange how some are flourishing and others are struggling. Like, it was just strange. So
I wanted to mention, since hay and straw were mentioned as covering the soil, you don't want to use hay because hay has seeds. And so you'll be planting weeds, the weeds of, you want to use straw. A straw is seed free.
Should be. Not all of it is. Make sure it's seed free.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's good advice. Jocelyn, you had your hand up. Do you have a comment or question? Oh, you're muted.
Okay. So I wanted to, the whole partridge pea dilemma, ask the experts here, could the problem be with inoculant, that the peas, that the seeds were not inoculated? We've had to spray, inoculant on our fledgling partridge peas and some of our other legumes that have, needed it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
John Root or Heidi even. What do you think? We've had also, people with lupine who, everyone's read The Lupine Lady. And so everybody wants to plant lupine, but they're like, oh, I planted and it died, or I put it home and it died. And I wonder, how does, I know these seeds have to be inoculated, but could that be the problem or no? What do you think?
I know that lupins are tough to get established, and it isn't just you and me, because Amy Pulley also has problems when she puts out lupin plugs. And I planted probably 6 lupins in what should have been an excellent place for them, and only one took off, and it's huge and beautiful, and the rest just disappeared. And I asked Amy about that, and she said, yeah, they do that.
Have any of you used those inoculant? I know you can buy inoculant products too, right?
I use that inoculant. I do.
Yeah. And does it,
Yep.
do you feel like it works? Does it work?
Yes, I have a lot of, Amy Pulley for one, but also the people at New England Wetland Plants really, really recommend it. They say it makes a big difference. And so you need to get inoculant. Apparently there's 2 types of fungus, or 2 families, or whatever, categories. Some are better for woody plants and some are better for herbaceous plants. So you want to get an inoculant that has a very wide range of the fungus spores in it to make sure you've got something that's going to work with your plant. I believe I got some from Fedco the last time.
Is it, this is a naive question, but is it readily available from lots of places? Like, can you just walk into a garden supply store and find? No. Okay.
No, I ordered it from Fedco.
I believe the inoculant is a bacterium, not a fungus.
No, I think it's a
Really?
Yeah.
I'm used to thinking of nitrogen fixing bacteria as being the heroes of nitrogen fixing.
Yeah, I don't think this is necessarily, I think we got off, you're right, but I think we got off on
Yeah, I asked two confusing questions. I
Yeah.
guess the question, my original question is, would you, nitrogen, legumes need nitrogen fixing bacteria and you can spray inoculant. I wonder, like, if you've collected, well, a lot of people, you've collected wild partridge seeds and tried to replant them. If you're planting them in the place that doesn't contain the nitrogen fixing bacteria, then they're not going
Right.
to. So
Well, it's true when you plant garden peas, you're recommended to treat them with inoculant, and partridge pea is a pea, it's a legume, so that would stand to reason. I think that's a good point, that you should perhaps use that inoculant. Yeah.
Wonder if that explains why all the clover seed we put down this year like didn't do much of anything. There's a lot of seed.
Mm.
I mean, it's not like nothing came up, but not as much as you would think should come up. The thing is supposed to grow in spite of you, right? And it didn't really do that. So it's an interesting theory.
Did you plant white clover?
Yeah, it was white clover.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had really mixed luck with white clover. My best clover patch was on really terrible soil, but I covered it with one of those erosion blankets. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's sort of like straw, weed-free straw that's sort of encased in a light web. Preferably, it's much better to get the cotton, little cotton threads holding it together. If you get the nylon, it can catch birds and kill them. So I don't recommend that. But yeah, I had this erosion blanket because we had all these slopes with, that we're just going to wash away. And so on one of them, I planted a whole bunch of white clover. It was actually that little mini clover. And I just spread the clover seed and then I covered it with this erosion blanket, and it's gorgeous. And that's the only place where I've had super good success with clover. That's just been my experience.
Cynthia, you have your hand up. I don't know if that's from before. Or do you have a new question? No, okay. Isabel?
So that micro clover, that's not native. It's an engineered
No,
plant.
it's not. No, the white clover is not native, but
But you used a micro clover, and I've been interested in micro clover.
Well, it's kind of a more pollinator friendly lawn substitute. You can walk on it, you can mow it.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a nice mat like grass does, and it is better. It does provide nectar and pollen.
So it does bloom.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you'd be amazed. Even after you mow it, you think you're mowing all the flowers off, and 2 days later, tons of flowers. Although I did hear Evan Abramson say that he thinks that red clover is a much more valuable pollinator plant. So, but it doesn't have a mini version of it that I know.
Right, it tends to grow pretty tall before it flowers, right?
Tall, yeah.
Great. Okay. So it's 8:07. So folks, if you have questions that you wanted to ask, please put up your hands so that we make sure we get to them before the session is over. I have a question, which is, it's about companion plantings. So I guess, is there general wisdom or a way of looking up which plants like work well together, which ones play nice together in close proximity? It's just something I'll say I live in Salem and we have a very small front lawn is probably a generous term for what it is. It's a square. And I'm trying to turn it as much as I can into like a little kind of pocket pollinator garden meadow thing. And because everything is so close together, and they're meadow plants, so that's what they do. But I'm just wondering how you know that. Is there a way to look it up? Is there just general wisdom like mints are good with this class of plants?
Well, I love Wild Seed Project, and they have a wonderful plant grid. And They also have pictures of it, and they'll, when you read the description of a plant, it often says goes well with. You know, so does the Native Plants of New England, the Mark Richardson, Dan Jaffe book.
Okay.
It goes, yeah, plant by plant. But I too, I'm moving into areas where there's invasives and there's a plant community that was there and is happening there. So I'm trying to do that research to try to return the plant community that may have been there. And I haven't found, other than a book that was done for Waltham, Prospect Hill, A Walk in the Park, a guide to plant communities in Prospect Hill Park. That gets really technical, and it's urban. It's an urban book. I am looking for, I just have to research plant by plant by plant to find out, you know, and experience, right? I mean, we've all been growing meadows or whatever, so you know that works well, and you know, you want to have grasses and what works well with grasses, but to actually sort of replicate the community that may have been there, that's where I'm still doing research. Heidi and John may have more.
Well, the Prairie Moon Nursery also, if you look up a plant, will suggest good plants to go. The same thing, it will say, you know, this works well with, and it'll give you like 3 or 4 other plants. There is sort of this folk wisdom around companion plants and you know, which I know there's a zillion books, like, you know, I can't remember what they're called. They're, you know, things like tomatoes love marigolds or something like that. But I don't know of anything like that around native plants. But I think when you look at those sources that say this plant goes well with these other plants, it's probably naming plants that both share the same cultivation requirements in terms of moisture and pH and you know, soil type, and also probably just look good together because the colors and shapes complement each other. That's what I would guess.
So it's less to do with like the underground, you know, how they're behaving with each
Yeah,
other
I don't think
underground,
that
and
they
more.
have like super symbiotic relationships, if that's what you're wondering about.
Yeah, yeah. I just want, if there are things that we, like, you know, if you plant it near this, that thing, like, you know, something toxic might, like milkweeds or something, there's a certain proximity around the plant where, you know, other
Well, that
kinds of
is
plants.
true. You know that some plants do produce those secondary plant compounds and,
Right.
and will poison neighbors.
Yep.
Well, don't plant any black walnuts. Don't do that.
Yep.
Our garden club has a speaker coming in the fall from the Native Plant Trust who's going to be talking about plant companions or communities, plant communities, which I think is what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
I'm under the impression, I could be wrong, that they're trying to focus more on these plant communities for native plants.
Who is coming to
Yeah,
speak?
Somebody from, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, but somebody from the Native Plant Trust.
Boy, I would love to attend that webinar, so it'd be great if you could.
You know, actually, it's
Okay.
I'm from the Lincoln Garden Club and Lincoln, Massachusetts, and we have 2 public talks every year, and this is going to be one of our public talks. So you're certainly welcome. And
It's going to be on Zoom or it's going to be in person?
well, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. You know, it's going to depend. I suspect it'll be, we're going to be trying to do both Zoom and in person at the same time. I'm not sure we're going to be able to work it out very well. So it's possible it will be both, but if you, what would be the best way? If you want to give me your email
Susan,
address,
will
maybe?
you actually send me that information, and then I can, if
Send
you
it
don't
to-
mind, can I share it with other folks?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
That would be, do
my
I have,
email, I just put it in
Yeah,
the chat. My email is rosemary@nofamass.org. Since I'm in the
Rosemary
chat,
at
nofamass.org.
okay. And MASS,
Yes.
yeah.
I also saw Jean just quickly, Bruce asked about the book that you mentioned. Do you mind putting the title of that book into the chat?
Yeah, so you're talking about the walk in the wild plant community? Yeah.
I think so. And Bruce could, if you want to clarify which book that was, it'd be helpful. You could in the chat. Okay, we have 2 hands. I'm going to go to Melinda and then back to Isabel.
Oh, thank you so much. So there's another strip in my property that was filled with swallowwort and trees of heaven and poison ivy, and I cleared part of that out, and now I'm slowly turning it into a pollinator garden. But I thought in the meantime, in the open areas, I would plant buckwheat, beautiful buckwheat flower, as a ground cover to cover the ground, because nature doesn't like nothingness, and beautiful, and it's a pollinator. The bunnies are going crazy with it, and so I bought this very natural repellent that is chili pepper and something else, and I'm just putting it on top of them. It works for a little bit, but short of putting them in cages, like trying to cage this whole area, which seems silly, and short of sharing some of the buckwheat with the bunnies, I don't really know what to do. I think the whole crop might go. Does anybody have any ideas? Thank you.
I also have just teams of roving bunnies that are mowing down my yard. I recently read, and I would like to verify it, but apparently blood meal will repel bunnies. But you have to put it down after every rain and probably every week. But buckwheat is a great cover crop, and it has, it will loosen the soil. And back to the question of how to loosen soil, there's also a kind of radish that will apparently bust up very compacted soil.
It's called a daikon radish.
Daikon.
There's another kind. Is it? I'm blanking on the name. Is it really daikon? Maybe.
No, they're big. They're really big.
They're big, and they just.
So they drill big holes in the ground for you, and they're edible too. But whether you eat them or not, if you leave them in the ground, they'll just rot and they'll create a hole that way. But you can harvest them and eat them too.
Nice.
Are you supposed to mow over I lived in Japan and I love daikon. Thank you for bringing that up. Are you supposed to mow over buckwheat, or should you just let it go, do its thing? And
just let it die. It'll winter kill.
Just plant over. Okay. Thank you so much.
Isabel, you had your hand up?
Yeah, sort of in the same vein as your companion planning. I've been looking for a resource that would tell me what my plant is a host for what animals. So I've got like blue vervain really blooming. It's being eaten all over. I don't see any caterpillars, but I've got lots of my things are being eaten. But I can't find a book or a graph that says, blue vervain is a host for these pollinators, and going on for whatever. Does anybody have a resource for that? I mean, there's a butterfly, so each butterfly that way, but I want to go plant to butterfly.
I think Heather Holm has a book.
Oh.
There's a section in the back of one of Talamy's books that's a chart.
Oh, great. Okay.
That it's a host, but I had to give a pollinator talk, and I found myself cross-referencing many different resources to come up with it. Even going to the butterfly, come in from the butterfly or the bee perspective to find out what they need. Jagir has handled a lot of the bee issues in his tables and things, but for butterfly, I'm trying to think of other ones.
I can answer that question.
Okay, good.
Because that's one of the signs that I made. Blue vervain hosts a common buckeye. So I don't know if you have any Buckeye caterpillars, but that is their host plant.
Okay. So is that on your website?
Yes.
Fantastic. Congratulations on your nursery. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Jocelyn.
Speaking of grasses, the 70% of native bees are ground dwelling. They're solitary ground dwelling bees. And so grasses are good for them. They can kind of provide protection, someplace to drill their holes.
That's good.
Yeah, I think we often overlook the grasses, right, when we're talking about pollinator gardens, because we're all interested in things that are flowering, but the grasses are really important too.
Yeah, grasses flower, they just don't have very showy flowers.
Conspicuous flowers, right? Great. Well, we are coming up on 8:20, so that is about the time we should be concluding our meeting. I see there's one hand up, so perhaps we can take one more question before we thank our panelists and sign off for the evening. Susan, do you want to be our last question of the night? Oh, you're muted.
I hope this doesn't open up a whole new topic, but you mentioned grasses, and that's actually one of the questions I had. I have a meadow that I established about 3 years ago, and I forgot to mow it this year. I was waiting until mid-May when the pollinators should be out of or the bees should be out of the stems, and I forgot to do it. And I've had a lot of grasses, some of which I think are native and are good, but I think there's one grass that I have that is not, but I have no way of knowing how to identify these grasses. Does anybody have any suggestions for grass identification?
Hire somebody.
Yeah.
New England wetland plants might be able to help you out. I think
No, they sell a few grasses, but
Yeah.
I'll tell you, identifying grasses is really hard unless they are flowering.
Yeah.
Once they flower, there's some good identification books on grasses, but boy, until they flower, I don't know. You need like a PhD in grass biology.
Yeah, well, that was what I was afraid of. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think these are hiding my flowering native plants. And so I'm not getting as many flowers as I was hoping to get. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. I will write that one down, and I'll actually look into that, whether there's like a grass guide or something that we could pass along. Awesome. All right. Well, there's a lot of information in the chat, and folks probably know how to do this, but just in case, if you want to save the chat file from tonight's meeting, if you go to the little place where you would type in a message, there are 3 dots. If you click that, you can say save chat file, and it will save it to your computer, usually in the downloads folder, whatever your sort of default places for downloads. So yes, please do that, and I'll do it too. And potentially, I'll try and send it out in my follow-up email with a link to the recording for this email, so you can review it. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, John. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Heidi. And also thank you to all the folks in the room who, again, we have so much collective knowledge in this network. It's really amazing. So thank you all for being here tonight, for asking questions, and for sharing what you know. And before we go, there will be we're taking a little break in August, so there'll be no August meeting, but we will resume monthly meetings in September. So I will see you all then, but if there's anything that you need or want to comment on, or any suggestions you have in the meantime, you feel free to just email me. It's rosemary@nofamass.org. I'll put it in the chat one more time. There it is. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay cool.
Yes, stay cool. Hopefully it rains. Bye, everybody.